Hello everyone. I hope everybody is safe and doing well in this lockdown. Today, inshallah, my friend Ahmed and I will be presenting the final chapter in this course of research methodology. Now, after covering 8 chapters, beginning with how to conduct research using quantitative and qualitative approaches, to identifying research problems, literature review, specifying how to write research questions and hypotheses, and moving to collecting and analyzing quantitative and qualitative data, we finally arrive at the final step in the investigation, which is how to write a report or the research report. So, the fruit of a long and tedious investigation culminates into a report composed in non-discriminatory way that takes into consideration its foreseen audiences. The last chapter in this reference, in part 2 of this reference, tackles how to write and compose a research report and how to evaluate the quality of this report. Therefore, this presentation stresses the importance of audience and how to compose the report in unbiased, ethical and scholarly manner using accepted criteria to evaluate and assess the overall quality of the report. The major ideas that are going to be covered in this presentation are 4 in total. So the first one is to define the purpose of research report and identify its types. The second point is to identify how to structure and organize your research report. And then the third point is to identify good, sensitive, ethical and scholarly writing practices. And finally, to list criteria for evaluating a research report. As a way of organization, I will be dealing personally with the first and the third points and leave the floor to my friend for the second and the last point. So, what is a research report and what are its types? A research report is a completed study that reports an investigation or exploration of a problem, identifies questions to be addressed, and includes data collected, analyzed, and interpreted by the researcher. A research report is written for audiences and varies in length and format. Also, there are differences between quantitative and qualitative research. As we have said earlier, a research report is written for a targeted audience. So, what are the audiences that will receive the report? When composing the reports, researchers keep in mind the targeted audience so that the way they write the report can be easily accessed by their audiences. Granted, different audiences employ different standards for assessment. Hence, the cardinal rule of writing is to write for the audience. Audiences include faculty advisors, journal reviewers, policy makers, practicing educators in the field, conference paper reviewers, and fellow researchers. Each audience has its own rules and procedures for guiding the standards or which guide the standards they use in reviewing a given study. The next point is to identify the types of research reports. There are many formats for reporting research, journal articles, technical research reports, monographs, or books, graduate theses, or dissertations. First, we begin with dissertations and theses, which are doctoral or master's research reports prepared for faculty and graduate committees, depending on the tradition of each school or department. The length of a dissertation or thesis may vary, but generally speaking, doctoral dissertations are lengthier than master's ones. Also, qualitative studies are much longer than quantitative studies. Next, a dissertation or thesis proposal is a plan for research report initiated and developed before the research actually begins. The difference between the proposal and the research report is that the proposal is written before the starting the investigation. A proposal is actually a plan on how we will conduct the study, but a report is a description of the results obtained from conducting the study. Therefore, the purpose of a proposal is to help an investigator think through all the aspects of the study and anticipate problems. Quantitative and qualitative dissertations and thesis proposals differ in their structure. For example, quantitative studies have three major sections starting from introduction, the literature review, and ending and arriving to the methods section. Conversely, for the qualitative studies, the structure is more flexible as it is based or mostly based on the views of the participants. Only two major sections appear in qualitative studies proposals, notably the introduction and the procedure. Also, the literature review in qualitative studies is included with the discussion instead of being on a separate section, as is the case in quantitative studies. The next type involves journal articles, which are prepared for readers of scholarly publications as well as for the editors and individuals who review the study. A journal article is a polished, shorter research report that you send to an editor of a journal. Journal articles are the most condensed form of writing because journals have severe space limitations and consequently most or nearly all, not all of the details of a complex research project can be presented in one single article. The next type is conference paper, which is a research report presented to an audience at a state, regional, national, or international conference, typically sponsored by a professional association. A conference proposal is a brief proposal to present a study at a conference. Typically, these proposals run about 3 pages long, and reviewers use them to determine whether they will accept the author's research for presentation at the conference. A final type of research report is one that you present to practitioners who are in positions of responsibility and in education. These individuals involve policymakers such as officials in government or leaders in school such as principals and curriculum designers. The research report presented to these individuals must follow these guidelines. First, the timing is important. Second, the report must present specific results from the research, and it must present the results in a simple and clear way. Next, it must include a one-page summary at the beginning of the research, and finally, it must obtain clearance from key individuals to present your research.
Hello everyone, I am Ahmed Mansour and I'm going to deal with the second and fourth parts of this presentation. Now, the second part is about how you should structure your report. Now, first of all, I find that it is important to state that though different university departments or organizations have their own preferred structure format for reports, still, as general guidance, reports are usually arranged in sections, each with a clear heading. The structure of the report refers to the physical structure of a study that forms a structure for research report or the underlying organization of topics that forms a structure for research report. Now, what are the advantages of structure of research report? Now, the first advantage is that it helps reading and understanding the report. It helps organizing the report into sections and subsections. It conveys major points in a study. Moreover, it helps you read studies and understand where to look for information. Now, please, if you have any other advantages, do not hesitate to provide us with some. Now, how to identify the structure of research report? To identify the underlying structure or physical structure of research report, you need to examine the different levels of headings. This is the easiest approach, and you can use the headings as road signs. Second, you look for the 6 steps in the research process, which are the research problem, literature, a purpose statement and questions or hypothesis, data collection, data analysis, and interpretation in the form of reporting. Third, look for the research questions or hypotheses and the answers researchers develop to these questions. Fourth, become familiar with structures of different types of reports, especially approaches using quantitative and qualitative research. Again, in your opinion, which one is the best strategy? Now, let's move to the structure of a quantitative research. Before we move to the structure of quantitative research, let me first explain what is a quantitative research. A quantitative research emphasizes objective measurement and the statistical, mathematical, or numerical analysis of data collected through polls, questionnaires, surveys, or by manipulating pre-existing statistical data using computational techniques. So, concerning the design of quantitative research report, it is comprised of these sections or chapters. Notably, we have introduction, we have review of literature, methods, results, and discussion. Of course, we have before introduction, we have the title page, abstract, and we end up with references and appendices. As you see, the body of the paper contains 5 major sections. However, due to space constraints, the front matter and back matter of journal articles are limited. But for dissertations or thesis, researcher can include the abstract of the study to help readers identify the major aspects of the study. Then we move to the qualitative research. The qualitative research is a type of social science research that collects and works with non-numerical data that seeks to interpret meaning from this data that help understand social life through the study of targeted populations or places. So unlike the quantitative report, the qualitative report, such as dissertation or thesis, includes 6 to 8 chapters in the report, in the dissertations, as well as 4 journal in the reports, in the dissertations, as well as 4 journal articles and conference papers due to the nature of the qualitative research. Also, depending on the emphasis of the research itself, the report will emphasize certain sections over the others. So as you see here, we have the title page, abstract, introduction, literature review, which is optional, procedure, findings, discussion, summary, conclusions and implication, references and appendices. Now for the qualitative researches are characterized with flexibility, which makes them difficult to read. Let's take, for example, the report of finding some forms of qualitative reports, which will emphasize description, whereas others will focus on themes or personal interpretations of findings by the author. Another characteristic is that the structures for reporting continue to emerge. Now let's move to the variations in structure of a qualitative study. Thus, it is important to become accustomed to alternative types of structure or variations on how to compose a qualitative research report. Now, the first one is a scientific approach, which is similar to a quantitative study in which all or most of the 5 sections, introduction, review of literature, methods, results, and discussion, are present. Second, a storytelling approach, which can have varied structure. The author uses literary devices, for example, metaphors, analogies, plot, climax, and persuasive, creative writing to present the study. Third, we have a thematic approach, which includes extensive discussion about the major themes that arise from analyzing qualitative database. Often, this approach uses extensive quotes and rich details to support the themes. And again, often these themes are interrelated and incorporated with specific qualitative design, such as grounded theory, ethnographic, or narrative designs. The fourth one in this list is a descriptive approach, which incorporates detailed description of people and places to carry the narrative. A study in this mode might convey a typical day in the life of an individual, for example. Then we have a theoretical approach, which is when the author either starts with a theory, for example, theoretical oriented case study, ends with a theory, for example, grounded theory, or modifies an existing theory based on views of participants. The last one in this list is an experimental alternative or performance approach, which may include a report of qualitative research in the form of a poem, a fictional story, a drama, or a highly personalized account called an autoethnography. Despite all these variations, 2 major approaches differ markedly in structuring qualitative reports, particularly the qualitative scientific approach and the qualitative storytelling approach. The qualitative scientific approach includes detailed procedures of inquiry and follows traditional form for reporting research that includes the introduction, the procedures, the finding, and a discussion. Conversely, qualitative storytelling structure is a flexible approach to writing a qualitative report, in that the meaning of the study unfolds through descriptions, the author's reflection on the meaning of the data, a larger understanding of the phenomenon, and a return to the author's stance on the topic. So here, if you compare between figure number 1, which is the upper one, and figure number 2, which is the lower one, which one is the qualitative scientific approach and which one is the qualitative storytelling approach?
In addition to understanding the structure of a study, researchers engage in good writing practices when they compose a research report. Therefore, this section is devoted to the ways that researchers should abide by when composing their research reports. In addition, first of all, a research report needs to be sensitive and respectful of people and places. That is, the report should use a language that reduces bias by avoiding demeaning attitudes, including biased assumptions and awkward constructions that suggest bias because of gender, sexual orientation, racial or ethnic group, disability, or age. To test your report against these biases, a researcher can describe individuals by using specific terms that are accurate clear, and free of bias. Second, he or she must be sensitive to labels for individuals or groups by calling people names they prefer. And finally, the researcher must acknowledge the participation of people in a study by identifying specifically all of the participants. In addition, likewise, researchers need to encode scholarly terms in their reports. These terms should reflect their full understanding of the different approaches as far as research writing is concerned. Therefore, for audiences will judge your research based on the appropriate use of quantitative and qualitative terms. For example, calling the sampling random instead of purposeful in a qualitative research shows lack of understanding on the part of the researchers. Therefore, researchers are advised to consult dictionaries of both quantitative and qualitative approaches to have a full understanding of the two types of research. In addition, in the same vein, researchers need to report ethically the research results. This includes shunning from falsifying data to support a hypothesis or research questions. Plagiarism is another unethical conduct that all researchers should avoid. Also, researchers should cite every reference of every information that they have copied from another text. Moreover, the issue of conflict of interest can render the research unethical. Finally, researchers need to give credit when credit is due. So credit for authorship needs to be established early in a project, and it is especially important for graduate students and their advisors to assess authorship credit for publications emanating from student research. Depending on the nature of the research, researchers need to use an appropriate point of view. In quantitative research, the investigator is in the background narrating or reporting the study. The writer uses the impersonal point of view, and he or she does not mention participants by first names or uses the first pronoun when reporting. In qualitative research, however, the researcher is typically present and in the foreground in the narrative report of the study. The use of first pronouns like I and we is evident in the personal experiences of the author that are directly written into the report. Similarly, researchers need to balance research and content. They should not emphasize one part over the other, but they must convey balanced knowledge about both research and content. Moreover, the researcher needs to consistently interconnect the sections of the report. Readers should not feel a separation between the sections. For example, in quantitative report, stating the variables and using their exact name each time you mention them can help connect the parts. Another linking device in a quantitative study is to use the same research questions or hypotheses wherever they appear in the research report. On the other hand, in a qualitative study, state the same central phenomenon each time you introduce it. You may introduce the phenomenon in the title, in the statement of the problem section, in the purpose statement, in the research questions, and in your findings. All in all, and for both qualitative and quantitative reports, researchers need to repeat the problem throughout the study. Finally, researchers need to advance a concise title for their research. The purpose of a title is simply to summarize this major idea of the paper in a concise and clear manner. The title should be no longer than 12 words in length. For quantitative studies, the title should include The major independent and dependent variables in the study, typically listed in order from independent to dependent. The next point is the participants in the study should be included in the title as well. And finally, the research site or location for the study should also be included in the title. For the qualitative studies, the components of the title should be or should include the central phenomenon being studied, the participants in the study, and the research site or location for the study.
Now, let's move to chapter number 4, which is evaluating the quality of research report. Now, although writing the research report can be tough, the process of evaluation can be even tougher, because if research seeks to prove, evaluation seeks to improve. Now, let me repeat this, because if a research seeks to prove, evaluation seeks to improve. This is taken from Patton. Indeed, researchers need to be mindful of the quality of the research. To do that, they need to employ appropriate standards and criteria. Now, generally speaking, a researcher could ask himself the following questions whenever he or she conducts research. In this situation, we refer to both quantitative and qualitative research. The first question is, does the research meet the standards for publication? Will the research be useful in our school? Will the research advance policy discussions in our region? Will the research add to our scholarly knowledge about a topic or research problem? Will the research help address some pressing educational problem? Now, these questions are intended to shape how we evaluate a research report. However, since quantitative and qualitative are different, then the criteria to evaluate each research is also different. Now let's move forward to signs of a poor quantitative research study. Now, the evaluation of quantitative research can focus on the data collection, the analysis or the reporting of the results. It can also emphasize the quality of hypotheses and variables, the control of extraneous variables, and the importance of the discussion and its implications for research and practice. However, we can ask different evaluative questions about different parts of the study. For example, when we want to evaluate the PEPs, we may ask, what are the aims of the study? For the research problem, we may ask, is it clearly stated? For the literature review, is it clear, relevant, present, based on studies reporting numbers? For the hypotheses and variables, does the study indicate the independent, dependent, intervening, moderator, and control variable? Does the study indicate the independent, dependent, intervening, moderator, and control variables? Now, for the key finding, what are the key findings of the study? For the study, what is the relationship of the study to the area of the topic review? For the setting, within what geographical care setting was the study carried out? Now, for the sample, what was the source population? And for ethics, was ethical committee approval obtained? Now, for the outcome measurement, what outcome measures were used? For the time scale of measurement, what was the length of follow-up, and at what time points was outcome measurement made? For the implications, to what setting are the study findings generalizable? For example, is the setting typical or representative of care settings, and in what respect? Now, for the qualitative research, criteria for a good research report vary depending on the emphasis of the researcher. Based on observation, criteria of evaluation for quantitative research revolve around philosophy, procedures, and participation. For example, as one interested in the philosophical ideas behind qualitative research, you might draw from perspectives about what constitutes knowledge. As a procedural researcher, you might emphasize the importance of rigorous data collection. And as a participatory writer, you might stress the importance of collaboration. Now, before we move to talk in detail about these three perspectives, let's examine the three sets of criteria for evaluating qualitative research developed by three authors. Now, when we talk about qualitative standard philosophical criteria, we're talking about, or we are emphasizing, standard setting inquiry community, positionality, community, voice, critical subjectivity, reciprocity, sacredness of relationships, and sharing privileges. However, when we talk about the procedural criteria, we are emphasizing rigorous data collection, consistent with philosophical assumption of qualitative research, employing tradition of inquiry, starting with focus on central phenomenon, writing persuasively, working on multiple levels of analysis, engaging the reader, and including strategies to confirm accuracy. And for the participatory advocacy criteria, we are working, or the researcher is looking for substantive contribution, aesthetic merit, reflexivity, impact, expression of reality. In sum, research evaluation should relate to the steps of the process of research for both qualitative and quantitative research. That is to say, every step in the research should be evaluated separately and in relation to the whole research. However, we can provide this process criteria to use for all research. That is, title for the study, research problem, the literature review, the purpose statement and questions hypothesis, the data collection, the data analysis, and the report writing. Now, before I say thank you for your attention, we are going to conclude what we have presented, me and my friend Abdurrahim. Now, we have worked on defining the purpose of research report and identifying its types, identifying how to structure your research report, identifying good, sensitive, ethical, and scholarly writing practices, and listing criteria for evaluating research report. Thank you.